All right.
Hey, James.
Hey, Nicole. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me anytime.
So we have James Walsh here, who is the owner of Premier Landscaping.
Landscaping.
Yeah, one of those two.
Either one.
And you are a local to Air, correct?
Yep. I live in Air.
Grew up in
Acton.
Okay.
Business mostly located in Acton. That's where all the equipment lives.
Okay. All the equipment lives, yeah. And I grew up in Acton too, so we are Actonites. Love it. Today I want to just talk about some of the things that I think my followers would appreciate understanding when it comes to home ownership. I know you guys are, we would call it certified drain specialists.
That's right.
How would you say that?
It's an NDS certified drainage specialist.
Okay, drainage specialist. So as a lot of you know, in New England, we are super wet, damp basements, water issues all over the place. So it's good to know if you do get water in your basement, how that can be fixed, how it can be prevented. And James is going to touch on a little bit about how you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, especially around here with the older houses that we have, they didn't always put, a lot of times they just backfilled it with whatever material they dug out of the hole. So they didn't really take it into consideration. So the two biggest things is going to be exterior grading, just sort of grading the landscape so the water naturally runs away from the house. And a lot of people don't have gutters for some reason around here. So if you don't have gutters, all that water is just dumping into right outside your foundation, and it cuts its own little hole and, just stays there, basically. So getting gutters, getting an underground piping system to pipe the water away from the house. Those are the two biggest things. And then the third biggest thing I see a lot is they'll say, well, I don't understand. I have a sump pump, but it runs all the time. And a lot of times, whoever did the sump pump, that's an inside contractor. Yep. So they don't really do anything outside.
Right.
And they stub out the pipe, it sticks 6 inches outside the house, dumps right back into...
So they didn't properly drain it like further away from the house like
right.
It should be. Okay.
Sometimes they'll put those little flex pipes on, and then, they'll be out in the yard and people will curl them up. I had one, it was awesome one time. It was a duplex, and the guy was like, yeah, this side gets a ton of water in the basement, the other side doesn't really, and we have sump pumps. So I was like, okay, let me take a look outside. And somebody had taken, it was a flex pipe for the sump pump discharge, and they had just sort of put it into the entry well for the basement for the other one.
Oh, jeez.
So it was basically pumping
just, like,
it out, just right into the basement on the other side.
Oh my God. And so I will say, I know you mentioned gutters. I've heard mixed things about gutters. Mm-hmm. So some people say sometimes they can do more harm than good. I guess it depends on like where on the house they are. Obviously, maintenance is important with gutters. I think too many people just put them on and think that they just do magic forever, right? Like how often would you suggest people get their gutters cleaned out?
I mean, it depends on where you're at. I get my gutters cleaned like 3 or 4 times a year because I get pine needles and leaves in there. And, if they're stopped up, then it's basically like not having gutters, right? So you're back to that issue that I mentioned before. And I don't know what it is. Some people are just like, no way, don't like gutters.
Yeah.
I
know a lot of builders who won't put them on houses now. Like you have to put them on after you've already bought like a new construction house. And I think a lot of times too, it's figuring out like once you've lived in it, like where the water dumps out to based on your angles of your roof or whatever. Like obviously you would want a gutter over like where you walk in and out of just so you're not getting dumped on like in a front porch or a back deck or something. But then also just like realizing that based on the angles of my roof, water is pouring into this area, and it's like a lot of times you'll notice it where there's either like stones or mulch or dirt that kind of gets hollowed out in that area, and that's where it starts to pool and can intrude into the basement. So just knowing like maybe one gutter there is fine or whatever. Now, what are your opinions on those like new gutter like kind of covers?
Honestly, I've never used them, but I mean I don't know if they work or not, honestly. I don't have a lot of experience with them.
Yeah.
The older style ones didn't tend to work. I can see where they'd be good if you had leaves. Pine needles, I find, seem to really gum those up for some reason.
All right. So we're going to get back to water getting into basements. Now, I want you to give me like the top you touched on the one reason would be water not being properly graded away from the house. Now, I notice this a lot when I go to look at homes with people. It's like, oh, they're super paranoid about water getting in basements, right? Like, which I totally get, especially with older homes. But when you walk up to a house and you look at the yard, if the yard, say the house is here, and you look at the house, if the yard's going away from the house, it's probably a good indicator that water's properly draining away from it, right? But if you look at the yard and it's kind of like angled in towards the house, like that's where you want to be a little more careful. Now, I've seen things like big septic mounds and stuff like that can pull water in towards the house. Now, talk to me about French drains.
Yeah, I mean that's a great tool if you've got, if it's sloping at the house. Really what you'd want to change it if you can so it slopes away from the house. Like, let's say the house is on a hillside. If you can slope that backyard away from the house back towards the hillside and then maybe have a French drain right there to collect the water and send it.
Now talk to me about what a French drain is, so people who don't understand it.
Oh man, people have a lot of difficulty understanding this concept. The way I like to explain it is, think of a French drain as a trench. So if you had a puddle of water and I just dug a trench downhill someplace else, we're in agreement the water would drain, right?
Should, right?
It should, right? Basically, a French drain it's got a pipe with holes in it at the bottom of it, which people struggle with a pipe with holes in it. They're like, but won't the water fall out of the pipe? I'm like, no, the holes let the water into the pipe.
Yeah.
So the pipe with the holes is basically like your trench, and then we cover it up with stone because water will flow through the stone. So you want the water to flow through the stone into the pipe, and then wherever the pipe is headed downhill.
And away from the house.
Away from the house.
Okay. Exactly. And then is that usually, like, is that different from a perimeter drain where that would be like closer to the foundation?
So that's going to be a different type of a French drain. So usually I think when people say perimeter drain, they're talking about like the perimeter of a yard. So that would be a French drain collecting water and keep intercepting it before it gets into the yard.
Or even into the yard at all.
Yeah.
No, so what would it be called if it was like right up against the foundation?
That'd be a foundation drain.
Okay.
Around here, you're not really required to daylight those. It just sort of, it's really more of a collection spot. Sometimes they get a permit to daylight those someplace else.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've seen them only a couple times on newer construction over the last couple of years, where I think they just put it in preventatively just to make sure there's no what ifs involved. I think it also depends on the type of, earth that surrounds the house too, how well it drains, if there's more clay or
clay's a big issue.
Yeah. And I've seen that with septic issues too, right? If like the septic system is surrounded by a lot of clay in the earth, like it'll likely fail faster than a place that doesn't have that. Now, I know in the past you touched on the fact that you guys were getting into doing Title Vs. Is that still happening?
Probably this year we'll start doing it.
Okay, it's always good to have that. And then let's talk about hardscape. I know you guys do hardscape, which is including nice patios, walkways, stone walls.
Right. These are the portfolio projects.
Okay, yeah, the pretty things, right? Now, I have a lot of people who lately have preferred to do patios over decks because of the low maintenance reason for them. You mentioned before we started filming that you've done a ton of fireplaces since COVID.
Yeah. I think I did more fire pits that year than I ever had before in my career because people wanted a gathering spot outside where they could have their friends come over, have a couple cocktails, and they're like, well, we're outside, so it's okay,
Yeah. Social distancing outside by a fire pit, right? And God, those days are over. But yeah, I mean, even now, so like people, I think what COVID did, I think for a lot of people is help them understand the importance of liking being at your own home and adding more things to your home to enjoy being there in the what if scenario of another COVID situation happens, right? So yeah, it makes sense that more patios and fire pits and stuff like that were added by you guys.
Oh yeah.
Now, were you seeing more of like the fire pits of just like a pit where people just threw wood into, or did you guys do some of the gas ones too?
We've never done a gas one. You got to have it's a little bit more expensive to do a gas one because now you got to involve a plumber, but we could do them. Most of the ones we do are either the segmental wall block, so either in a circle or square, or veneer stone. But then we did one a couple years ago. It was really nice, and they wanted like a custom cut granite piece to go around the top of it, and I was
wow.
like,
Nice.
oh man,
Send us a
that's a
picture
good
of that
one.
one.
I'll
We
get
can
you a
pop it
picture
up
of
on the
that one.
screen.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then, so if someone wanted to do a patio at their house, what's the best way to go about contacting you and getting set up for, like, do you guys do free consultations or?
Usually, yeah. Usually it's a free consultation. And we would go take a look. It's better if there's not a patio there already, because it'll, there's less expense on the disposal side. But I mean, you can put it anywhere. Like, we've done them in place of a deck. We can demolish the deck, get you a set of stairs and put a patio there. Really just, I'm sure you can put the number in the bottom of the video, and we can, we'll come out, take a look at it, and get you a price.
Okay. And then when you say getting rid of a deck and having a patio instead, like, I know with decks there's a lot of maintenance, unless you're doing one of those newer composite ones that you just have to kind of keep clean. But compared to a wood deck, what is the maintenance required with a patio?
There's not a lot of maintenance. I mean, you can have it sealed if you want, but most people don't even bother with sealing it. Once it's there, it's, you're pretty much good to go. They'll last for quite a long time. I usually tell people most landscaping will last around 25 to 30 years, and then by that time, your plants are overgrown. Your pavers might be starting to look a little bit worn, but so that's about the expectation.
Okay. And now you talk about the 25-year lifespan. I'm sure if someone's coming in and buying an older home where the yard has just been completely overgrown, right? I've seen it a lot lately.
Same.
People they get older, they stop taking care of their yard, their house in general, and everything's just overgrown. These plants that should have been trimmed down are just enormous, and they're taking over a side of the house or a window or whatever it may be. Now, you guys can come in and help, like, completely clear it all out and start fresh again?
That's one of my favorite things to do, the full yard do-over. Come in, we'll take all the plants out and just kind of bulldoze everything flat. That's a great time to address any grading issues if you've got water that's going places where you don't want it, and start fresh with some new plants. We can put patios, walkways, stairs wherever we need to, and then all fresh loam and seed.
Okay. And then do you guys work with a landscape designer for that, or do you guys do it all in one?
We usually do that in-house.
Okay. So you can help people pick out, like, what plants are good for what areas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's good, because I think I get that question a lot. It's like, oh, I want to, like, redo either the front of my house, the mulch beds or whatever, but I don't know, like, I don't even know where to start, because there's certain plants need so much light or so much shade, and you can go all type of wrong ways with that.
Oh, yeah. That.
You got a good story for that one?
Well, I went one time. And I could tell that this guy had hired, like, somebody really cheap to do some work before, and he was asking me questions about it, and I was like, yeah, that's probably not the greatest. And he was like, what do you think about this tree right up against the house like this? I was like, well, looks like the guy left the tag on it. Let's take a look at it. And I was like, well, I don't know, man. It's right next to your house, and it says that this thing will grow to be like 25 feet wide, so probably not good to leave it right here, So it's, you got to at least, at a minimum, look and see if it's a full shade or full sun, or
how big it can
certainly how wide it's going to get.
Oh yeah, I've seen a bunch of those. So that's definitely good advice. When it comes to, I've had a few people who have bought these homes that have, like, 1, 2, 3 acres that are kind of more common in our area. But there's the yard that they have is, like, really small in comparison to how much land they actually have. Now, if they wanted more of, like, an actual backyard, is that something that you guys can do?
Absolutely. That's not a problem. That's one of our favorite things to do. That's we did that at our house.
What does that entail?
Basically, we would probably have a tree company come in to take down, all the trees, or as many trees as we needed to. We can dig out all the stumps. Again, kind of address grading issues. If we have to bring in fill or kind of cut down a hillside, we can look into that. And then, basically just cap it with fresh loam, seed it, and now you got a big yard.
All right. And then if someone was to do that, what would you prefer to do? Like seeding, or was that called when they come in and just bring
Hydro
in like
seeding?
hydro seeding
sod.
or sod? That's
Sod,
so nice.
I mean,
it's like you're just rolling out the green
yeah.
carpet of grass, right?
Yeah.
It's just like Instalawn, which is great.
I usually try to steer people away from sod.
Really?
Yeah, it's
because it's expensive.
It's super expensive.
Yeah, but what if they're like unlimited budget? Let's just go. Like, there's nothing wrong with
there's
using
nothing
it, right?
wrong with using it. No.
Yeah.
We typically will use sod just in like smaller areas if it's like maybe just like a smaller front yard if you're trying to spruce it up for sale or something.
Yeah.
Typically, if you are doing it the right time of year, we find that either raking in seed or hydro seeding is probably a lot more budget friendly.
Yeah, and hydro seeding is the one where they come in with like the hose and they just like spray this
they
like
paint everything green.
Yeah, it looks like green paint all over the yard, right?
Yep.
And what that does is essentially helps the grass seed not get like blown away by
it's got
water or whatever.
it's got kind of a mulch in with it, so it'll hold the moisture up against the grass seed a little bit better.
Okay.
And it's kind of like it sticks better if you've got a hillside or something.
Okay.
It'll keep your seeds stuck to it.
There you go. And now I've seen people throw like a bunch of hay on like a lawn before. Why do they do that?
So that is usually kind of along the same lines. It sort of holds the moisture in, and it keeps the seed moist. Because let's say you just put the seed out on the dirt, and you walk by and you see the dirt, and the dirt's like dry. Mm-hmm. You're not getting any germination when the seed is dry. But you also don't want it like puddling. You don't want it so soaked.
Right.
So you just want to keep it moist, and when the seed is moist, that's when it's going to germinate. And it usually takes anywhere from 5 to 15 days, call it, to start getting your little baby grass to pop out. But to your point about the hay, it just sort of holds that moisture up against the seed, and it can help with erosion control if you've got steep grades or whatever that you're trying to deal with.
Yeah, because that makes sense. Because usually I'll see it on a lawn that has like maybe a septic mound or whatever, and so they're trying to stop it. And birds, right?
Yep.
I've seen a lot of people get birds come in and they fly and they eat the grass seed, right? And then there's like a patch where like the birds just ate all the grass.
I don't know. I hear that a lot. I don't know if they really eat it.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
I don't know. We're gonna Google that one.
We'll have to, because maybe I guess I should know, right?
All right. Now, I want to hear one of your biggest nightmare, stories that you have.
Oh, man. Usually a rainy September, that usually is kind of a nightmare scenario, because September is just kind of the best month to do lawn renovations. Mm-hmm. And raking out, you kind of can't spread and rake loam when it's real rainy like this past year was.
Yeah.
So those are kind of typically those will give you the most trouble, because you're trying to work and you're like, well, I got this window where I want to seed this lawn, and if you've got a big loam delivery coming, you're like, well, I got to spread this, now I got to rake it out and I got to get the seed in. But
has there been any crazy water issues you've seen on a house that you were like, I can't believe I just saw that and worked on that and now fixed it, hopefully, for them? Give me a true life story.
Oh man, I had one where this guy took tremendous pride in his lawn, and he was like, yeah, it's always been real soggy right here. And I was like, yeah, it's weird. Maybe it's because it's in the shade. And I was like, it's kind of downhill. I couldn't really figure out why it was. And so we started doing the job, and I figured out, I was like, okay, well, this guy had a permit to discharge his foundation drain into the stormwater management system for the street. And, I was like, I think maybe that pipe's just plugged or something. Mm-hmm. So I tried, and this guy was on vacation too. So I tried snaking it, and the snake just stopped and I was like, that's odd. So I tried running water down it, and the water backflowed, and I was like,
something's up.
I'm going to dig this pipe up. So I start digging up the pipe, and it turned out that what it looked like was whatever landscaper installed the lawn probably when the house was built new, probably had broken the pipe. So the pipe was broken, and it was like, ripped up. So it was doing one of these. So that's when the pipe gets a belly, that stops the water. Plus it was broken. So it just went into, so anyways, so I got this guy's whole yard dug up. Guy, again, tremendous pride in the yard. This is an area I'm not even supposed to be working in. He arrived, so the airport shuttle arrives from like Disneyland, and he gets out with his kids. He's like,
what did you do to my yard?
Hey, James, what's going on? I was like, hey, buddy, what's happening? I know it doesn't look like it, but I actually have great news. I figured out why this is so wet right here.
Oh, man.
But he wound up being happy about it. But I think when he got out, he was like, what is this guy doing?
Oh, my God.
He dug up half my yard. Yeah.
Well, probably a little bit bigger bill than he planned on spending.
Yeah.
But it's fixed.
A little change order, but
it happens.
He was happy.
That's funny that you talk about like crushed pipes. So like that's something I don't think about very often, but I had a house maybe a year or two ago now that along the same lines, this isn't a water drainage issue, but this was part of the leaching field for a septic system.
Yep.
And we actually, luckily, it was in New Hampshire, and in New Hampshire, you don't need a Title V inspection to sell a home,
Yep.
which states that your septic system is in good working order, right?
Yeah.
But we, as part of our offer on this house, said that we wanted to do a septic inspection.
Smart.
Luckily, we did, right?
Yeah.
And this was one of those houses that like nothing looked well maintained, right? So
Yeah.
I was like, this something's gonna pop up
Yep.
here. And the guy comes out and he goes to inspect this septic system, and just by happen chance, he dug up in a couple areas and he found like crushed pipes in the leaching field.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, not good, right?
Yeah.
So like the sewage was just like.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't want to know. But yeah, so luckily we found that, and
Yeah.
it was because he said obviously some vehicle had driven over
Yep.
this, didn't know that they were there. So like things to be aware of, like when you have a house that has any kind of drainage system or leaching field, is don't drive over it with like a
Right,
car or a
yeah.
machine or whatever it may be. You can just cause a lot of damage and issues.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it depends on what you're driving over it. I mean, like, certainly we wouldn't drive like a loaded triaxle over it, if we were getting a delivery.
Right.
The types of machines that we use with tracks, perfectly acceptable to go driving over a leaching field.
It's like small little bobcats and things like
Yep.
that.
Yeah. What we'll do is we'll locate the distribution box. That's kind of the only thing you really want to avoid traveling over if you can.
Yeah.
And then, obviously the tanks, depending on how deep they are. I've seen guys break tanks. It's not.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, that's
expensive.
That's a
It's
crappy
an
day.
expensive,
Right?
crappy
Yeah,
day.
There you go.
Literally.
You gotta say it.
Oh man. All right. So when it comes to landscaping, like tell me a little bit about the favorite jobs that you guys like to do. If someone thinks about needing a landscaper, most of the time they think about who's going to cut my lawn or
Right.
trim my bushes, right? But that's not your specialty. So talk to me about some of like your favorite things that you like to do.
Most of what we do, like I said, full yard renovations. We love doing that. Any kind of lawn renovation, even if you've got kind of just a section of the lawn that you want torn up and replanted, those are great. If it's a situation where you're going to say, oh, maybe I'll do like a third of the yard each year, and then a couple years from now I'm going to have a nice perfect lawn. Those are great. Or people that we'll work with and they'll say, well, I want this tremendous outdoor living space, and then they find out how much it costs and they say, well, I don't know about that. We can make a plan to kind of say, okay, this year we're going to do this, this year we're going to do this. So those are two kinds of jobs. Like we said, the lawn expansions, the yard expansions, those are great. We really like doing those. Yep. And those, honestly, those are the ones that people, I feel like when somebody hires us for a patio, they've got kind of an idea in their head of what it's going to look like. And when they're like, well, I'd like more yard over there, they kind of don't,
no idea what to expect.
they don't really know what to expect. And when they see it after, they're like, wow,
They're
this
like,
is,
oh, that's a yard.
yeah. So maybe that's why I like doing those, because
Right.
people always are like, wow, this was so
It's
great.
more rewarding,
Yeah, right.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
Stroking the old ego.
Yeah. Now let's talk about more of this like drainage, like
Sure.
expert that we like to call you, because I think that is, to me, probably one of the biggest things I see as a real estate agent is my clients having issues with their either water intrusion or
Right.
water prevention, especially in older
Yeah.
homes.
If it's,
So,
So I mean, I'll give you an example of like, so when I bought my house, it had a partially finished basement, and so there was this one corner in the unfinished part where we're like, man, it smells really musty over here. So there was that, and then we had some evidence of water damage around like where the basement door is, which typically on a walkout basement, sometimes you've got, you know, the grade sort of goes towards that walkout basement door. So, you know, typically the first thing we'll do is we'll look up to see like where water's coming from, and then we'll look down to see where it's, you know, graded to. So in the instance of my house, in that corner, that musty smelling corner, so we have a water softener. And so people don't realize a lot of times those discharge like 50 gallons of water at a time, 30 to 50 gallons. And so, like I said, it was kind of, the pipe was just sort of stubbed out, and it was dumping basically right into the foundation in that corner. There was also a downspout that wasn't buried, so we were getting a lot of roof runoff, plus the and I think the previous owner might not have even realized that that's where the water softener dumped out, because it was underneath the deck.
Oh, wow.
So you couldn't even see it.
Yeah.
You know, if you just happen to be on the deck and be like, where's that water noise coming from?
Oh, wow.
You know, so you know, hooking those two things up and piping that water away from the house really took care of that corner. And then, you know, outside of the basement door, you know, that's a spot a lot of times where we'll put a French drain. I was, you know, I had the fall where I was able to put a French drain and just pipe it out to daylight, and get a lot of the water away. And even gutters, like I'll put in another plug for gutters. Like my company doesn't do gutters, but right outside that basement door, the garage roof and the main roof from the house kind of meet up.
Right.
And so it was just kind of a lot of water coming to that one spot, and it would overflow the gutter. And if it was a heavy rain, there'd be like a waterfall just kind of overflowing the gutter in that spot. So I talked to a gutter company, and they were like, well, we can put bigger gutters. And I was like,
Right.
perfect. So,
And even though you don't do gutters, we
Right.
have some of our go-to people who can install
Right.
them for you, right? So yeah, I think it sounds like it's just like a lot of trial and error, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no one size fits all with water issues with
Right.
basements. So it's, you know, diagnosing the problem, addressing the problem, and keeping it preventative maintenance for moving forward, really.
Right.
Obviously, I always tell people you should have a dehumidifier in your basement, because even the driest basements can get musty.
Yep.
And you want to prevent any kind of moisture in there. So always have a dehumidifier running, even in a finished basement for sure. And you really should have those properly draining out of
Yeah.
the house on some level, whether it's into, I've seen people drain them into like the heating system drainage,
Yep.
or, you know, the same the washing machine drainage, or whatever it is that drains out of your house. Don't get the ones that you have
Yeah.
to like every day or two go downstairs
Yep.
and like empty the
Yeah.
you know, bucket, because those can stop automatically. And then if you're not down in your basement for a week or two or three or whatever, you know, you're having a musty basement.
yeah,
So.
it's the ones that you have to empty every day. It's the big thing is remembering to empty
Yeah.
them, right?
I mean, I can't even remember to, I don't know, do anything
Yeah,
any day.
I know,
right?
I know.
So yeah, I hear you on that. So let's chat. What other things are really important to you about what you do for work? And do you have any questions for me while we're here?
Gosh, I don't know. Not on camera. Yeah, I don't know.
No. Nothing.
Nothing.
No B&I plugs or.
Plug for the guy that was supposed to be here today.
Oh man, damn it, Joe.
Yeah. No, but I mean, we'll use him too on, you know, maybe that's a good thing, is like if you have a patio, if you are demolishing a deck, sometimes you'll want to get like a set of carpentry stairs. So usually we'll work with somebody that's licensed for that.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm not supposed to.
Not supposed to. You're like,
Yeah.
I can, but not
I
supposed
could.
to. That's like, he's like, don't pull a permit for anything. And he,
I know.
My
Well,
buddy Peter's pulling a permit for his deck right now. And it took him like an extra 2 months to get the permit.
Yeah.
And Joe's like, F you.
Oh man, I don't know why. I've hold permits for things. I don't think it takes that. I mean, it takes longer.
It's also Joe, so let's be
Yeah.
real. Like, he's
Yeah.
probably Joe just blaming it on everyone else but himself.
It could be.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on today. I appreciate your insight to all things landscaping. And
Yeah,
for
anytime.
anyone who's interested in any of the things that we talked about, I'll give his information below and reach out to him anytime.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me. All right.
We'll get a